Her alien love is dangerous. But does he know? What if love wasn't something you found within your own heart, but across the vast emptiness of space, among the stars themselves? Could you truly love someone so unlike yourself? Someone whose very existence defies everything you know? Or would the distance between you be too great to bridge, even with the most powerful emotions? A question I had never dared to ask myself. Until one night, when everything changed. It was supposed to be just another uneventful evening, lost in the hum of everyday life, when a strange signal pierced the silence of my world. A message that didn't come from any familiar source, but from somewhere far, far away. A message from another world. The truth was, I didn't even know who, or what, was reaching out to me. But in that very instant, as my heart pounded in my chest, I realized my life was about to collide with something far beyond human comprehension. The kind of love that no one could explain. A love that could only exist between two beings from different worlds. Both of us caught between the strange gravity of fate and the pull of an uncharted future. But how could we, two creatures from different corners of the universe, ever understand each other? She was from a place I couldn't even imagine, with eyes that shimmered like galaxies in the night sky. Her presence as haunting as the stars themselves. And me? I was nothing but a man, grounded in the dust of earth. Yet somehow, we were drawn together. Two hearts reaching across the infinite void. But could our love survive the trials of two vastly different worlds? This is where our story begins. An impossible love. An intergalactic journey. And the powerful force that defies all logic. The heart. Stay with me. The journey we're about to embark on might just be more than either of us ever dreamed possible. The stars twinkled in the vastness of the cosmos, a sight so familiar to human eyes. But for Ethan, a young engineer from Earth, the view was not one he had ever expected to experience. He stood on the edge of a vast alien landscape. The dark purple sky above illuminated by the glow of distant, unfamiliar stars. The air, thick with an electric hum, carried a sense of unease. He was part of a research mission. A journey that had taken him far beyond Earth, to the mysterious planet of Zathar. Suddenly, a faint shimmer caught his eye. From the distance, a figure emerged from the shadows of the towering alien trees. It was her Zara. A being unlike anything he had ever seen. Her skin was a radiant emerald green, shimmering under the alien moons, with glowing veins of light running across her body. Her long, platinum white hair cascaded down her back, shifting slightly in the alien breeze. Her eyes, a deep violet, glowed softly as she gazed at him. The sheer beauty of her presence took Ethan's breath away. Ethan had been briefed about the Zatharians, an alien species whose culture, history, and biology were vastly different from humanity's. But nothing could have prepared him for the encounter with Zara. Her presence was intoxicating. The pull between them undeniable. She was a creature of immense beauty, power, and grace. Unlike anything he had ever imagined. Her eyes locked onto his. the air between them thick with an unspoken understanding. Zara, for all her alienness, seemed to carry an energy that Ethan could almost feel deep within himself. The moment stretched, the silence between them more meaningful than words could ever express. "You are not like them," Zara's voice echoed in Ethan's mind. The words not spoken aloud, but communicated directly through a kind of telepathy that made his pulse race. Ethan's throat went dry as he managed a shaky breath. "Neither are you," he replied softly, his voice betraying the strange tension that had built between them. Zara tilted her head, an almost playful gesture. "I am Zara, of the Zetharian people. And you are different." Her words weren't judgmental, nor were they a simple observation. There was curiosity, a kind of intrigue in her voice, one that only deepened the magnetic pull between them. Ethan's mind raced with questions about her origins, the nature of her people, and why she was here. But he didn't ask. His focus was entirely on Zara. The way her glowing eyes seemed to peer straight into his soul, unraveling all the carefully constructed walls he had built around himself. He felt like an open book in front of her, vulnerable, yet strangely exhilarated. "You've come to study our world," Zara continued. "But you must understand, not all that you seek is meant to be found." Ethan blinked, processing her words. But before he could respond, the quiet of the night was broken by the sudden sound of an approaching vehicle. The research team had arrived, their footsteps echoing against the alien terrain. Zara's gaze shifted towards the sound, then back to Ethan, her eyes now shimmering with a new intensity. "Be careful, Earthling," she whispered into his mind, her voice like a soft caress. "Your kind is not yet ready for what lies ahead." With that, she turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving Ethan standing alone, his heart racing, and his mind spinning with questions he knew he couldn't yet answer. But the connection between them, something powerful and primal, was undeniable. And in that moment, Ethan knew his life had changed forever. The research facility was alive with the usual hum of alien machinery, and Ethan stood at the control panel, his thoughts drifting far away from the task at hand. The image of Zara's glowing eyes and the quiet intensity in her voice replayed in his mind over and over again. Despite the urgency of their mission on Zathar, all he could think about was her, the alien woman who had captivated him with a single glance. "Ethan." A voice broke through his trance. It was Dr. Monroe, the mission leader, a seasoned scientist who had seen more than his fair share of alien worlds. "Sorry, Dr. Monroe," Ethan muttered, snapping his focus back to the task. Monroe raised an eyebrow. "You're not still thinking about the Zetharian, are you?" Ethan's stomach tightened. "I didn't say that." Monroe smirked, clearly reading Ethan's mind. "Don't get too distracted, son. This mission isn't about exploring strange new feelings. We're here for the data." Ethan gave a tight nod, but his mind refused to let go of Zara. There was something about her, her otherworldly beauty, her strength, her enigmatic aura that made her impossible to forget. But as much as he wanted to know more, he couldn't afford to get involved. Not with her. Not here. Yet the thought lingered, gnawing at him. That night, alone in his quarters, Ethan lay wide awake. The sound of Zathar's unfamiliar winds outside his window filling the silence. The thought of Zara's warning, her presence, and the strange connection between them gnawed at him like an itch he couldn't scratch. It wasn't just her beauty, it was the way she made him feel. It was as if, in her presence, he had been reduced to something far more vulnerable than the confident, capable engineer he was. There was a knock at his door. Ethan stood up abruptly, heart hammering. He hadn't expected anyone to visit, least of all Zara. He opened the door cautiously. To his surprise, it wasn't Zara standing there. Instead, it was Lila, a fellow researcher who had been assigned to help Ethan with the technical side of the mission. "Can we talk?" Lila asked, her tone surprisingly gentle. Ethan nodded, stepping aside to let her in. "What's on your mind?" Lila hesitated before speaking, her eyes flickering nervously. "You've been acting strange. Ever since you met the Zatharian, I've noticed you're distracted. Is everything okay?" Ethan couldn't bring himself to tell her about Zara. He couldn't explain what had happened between them. The pull he felt, the almost mystical connection. How could he? She wouldn't understand. "I'm fine, Lila," Ethan replied, forcing a smile. "Just a lot on my mind with the mission." Lila studied him for a moment, her expression softening. "Ethan, I know this mission is important. But you don't have to carry it alone. Don't let whatever's bothering you get in the way." Ethan nodded, appreciating her concern. But the weight of his thoughts about Zara felt heavier than ever. He wasn't sure why, but Zara had awakened something inside him. Something he wasn't ready to face. As Lila left, Ethan returned to his bed, his mind full of questions. He wanted to understand what Zara had meant by her cryptic warning. The hint of danger she spoke of. He couldn't just ignore it. The next day, he made up his mind. He had to see her again. Ethan's boots clacked softly on the metal floor as he made his way down the winding corridors of the research facility. His pulse was racing, but it wasn't the anticipation of the mission that had him on edge. It was the undeniable force that had been growing since the moment he met Zara. The alien woman whose gaze had set him on a path he couldn't ignore. His mind wrestled with conflicting thoughts. Part of him told him to focus on the mission. This wasn't some fleeting attraction, not something that could ever be part of the reality of intergalactic exploration. Zara wasn't human. And whatever feelings were stirring inside him, they could never be returned in the way he wanted. But then, he would recall the way her luminous eyes had shimmered when they locked onto his. The warmth in her tone. And he felt that familiar stirring deep in his chest. The decision was made, though. He needed to see her again. If only to understand what had happened between them. As he approached the designated room where Zara was being held, he hesitated for just a moment. This wasn't supposed to be personal. He was part of a team, scientists, engineers, the best humanity had to offer. Yet here he was, sneaking away from his duties, pulled towards something far deeper than curiosity. Something more primal. He opened the door and stepped inside, his eyes immediately searching the dimly lit room. There she was, sitting in the same chair he had left her in, still restrained by the shimmering energy cuffs that had been placed around her wrists. But she wasn't looking at him this time. Instead, her gaze was fixed on the swirling lights above, almost as if she were lost in thought. Her expression serene yet distant. "Zara," Ethan said softly, his voice almost a whisper. Her head turned slowly toward him. And for a moment, neither of them spoke. Her eyes locked onto his. And in that instant, everything else seemed to disappear. The sterile lab, the hum of the facility, the looming responsibilities, everything faded, and it was just the two of them, standing in a space between galaxies. "I didn't think you'd come back," Zara's voice was soft, melodic. But there was an undercurrent of something more profound in her words. Ethan swallowed, trying to steady himself. "I had to. There's something between us, Zara. Something I can't explain." Zara studied him for a long moment, her large, violet eyes narrowing slightly, her lip curling into a faint, knowing smile. "You think you can explain it?" She leaned forward. Her movements graceful, almost ethereal. "Like a dream. You've never known anything like this. I come from a place where emotions aren't so complicated." Ethan could feel the tension between them tightening with each word. "Maybe. But I don't care where you're from. The way we connected feels real." The air between them shifted. Zara's glowing skin, her emerald hue, seemed to shimmer even more in the dim light. She moved slightly, and Ethan caught the faintest glimpse of her body, curving in all the right places under her futuristic attire. The form-fitting fabric hugged her like a second skin, outlining every curve, as though she were designed to be admired. He quickly looked away, embarrassed by his thoughts, but the fleeting image lingered in his mind. Zara noticed the shift in his gaze, and a faint chuckle escaped her lips. "You can't deny it, can you?" Ethan's breath caught in his throat, and he forced his focus back on her eyes. I'm not trying to deny anything. But this is wrong. I shouldn't feel this way about you." Her smile deepened. A mix of amusement and something more intimate that Ethan couldn't quite grasp. "I'm not human, Ethan. There's no right or wrong here. Only what we decide to do with what we feel." He took a hesitant step closer. "So, what are you saying? That this, whatever this is, it can be real?" Zara slowly rose from the chair. Her movements almost fluid, as though she were made of the very light that flickered around them. "It doesn't have to make sense, Ethan. It only has to be something we choose to explore." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He was dangerously close to crossing a line that he didn't even know existed. Suddenly, Zara closed the distance between them in a flash. Her hands gently touching his arm. Her fingers were cool, but the touch sent a shock of electricity through him, making his pulse race. The warmth of her skin, the soft glow of her body, and the intensity of her gaze made him feel things he wasn't ready to confront. She tilted her head, brushing her lips against his ear. "You want to know what it feels like," Zara whispered, her voice a blend of warmth and something more carnal. "But you're afraid of losing control." Ethan's throat went dry, his mind swimming with conflicting emotions. It wasn't just the attraction, not just the way she looked, but the way she made him feel. The overwhelming force of her presence, the way she reached into his very soul. She was right. He did want to know. He turned toward her. And before he could stop himself, he reached for her, drawing her closer. Zara didn't pull away. Instead, she let herself melt into his embrace, her body pressing against his in a moment of perfect synchrony. The heat between them built slowly, like a storm brewing, neither one willing to retreat. As their lips met for the first time, it wasn't just a kiss. It was an explosion of raw sensation. A mingling of two worlds, two beings that should never have connected but somehow found a way. Zara's lips were soft, her taste unlike anything he had ever experienced. A mixture of warmth and something more elemental. Ethan's hands roamed over her form, his fingers tracing the curves of her body, feeling the pulse of energy that radiated from her skin. He had never been this close to someone or something so completely foreign, yet so undeniably familiar. The touch sent an electric current coursing through both of them, igniting something deep within Ethan, something wild and untamed. He felt his heart race, his breath quicken. But Zara didn't seem to hesitate. Instead, she matched his pace, her touch steady, her hands gliding over his broad shoulders, down his chest, as though she were memorizing the feel of him. And then, as quickly as it began, the moment shifted. Zara pulled back just enough to look into his eyes, her expression unreadable, as though she were weighing something that neither of them fully understood. The tension between them was palpable, and Ethan's breath came in sharp gasps as he stared at her, wondering if he had just crossed a line. But there was no going back now. He had already felt the pull of the unknown. "Are you ready for what comes next?" Zara asked, her voice soft, yet firm. Ethan swallowed hard, unable to answer. He had no idea what came next, but he knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened, it was something he couldn't ignore. The moments after their kiss hung heavy in the air. The sound of their breathing, the only thing that filled the sterile room. Ethan's heart thundered in his chest, still reeling from the intensity of the moment. Zara, too, seemed lost in the space between them, her once calm demeanor now giving way to a shift he couldn't quite interpret. Zara's fingertips gently brushed against Ethan's chest, tracing the outline of his muscles, as if she were trying to understand his human form. Each movement purposeful, deliberate. He could feel the warmth of her skin through the thin fabric of her clothes, her touch almost magnetic in its pull. "Ethan," Zara spoke his name with a deep, resonating tone, a voice that carried weight. There was an unfamiliar tenderness in it now, but it was also clear that she was contemplating something. She wasn't merely responding to attraction. Zara was someone who knew her own boundaries, and tested them only when it was worth it. "What happens now?" Ethan's voice was strained, his mind a blur. He wanted more, yet the magnitude of what he was feeling both excited and terrified him. They were crossing lines, ones that, in any other circumstance, they shouldn't have even considered. But now, standing in front of each other, their connection seemed to defy logic. defy reason. And still, he couldn't pull away. Her eyes flickered with something unreadable, and for a moment, she was lost in thought. Her violet gaze locked onto his as she took a step closer, closing the remaining space between them. She was beautiful in ways he couldn't describe. There was something about the way her body moved, fluid and confident, that made him ache with longing. "Don't ask me to explain it, Ethan," she said, her voice a whisper now. "Some things are meant to be felt, not understood." Zara reached up to touch his face, her hand cool against the warmth of his skin. Her fingers brushed over his jawline, the sensation both soothing and electrifying. He could feel her power emanating from her fingertips, an energy he couldn't quite comprehend, but felt with every fiber of his being. Her touch was like fire and ice all at once, a sensation that made him dizzy with want. "Zara," Ethan whispered, his voice breaking slightly. "You're not like anyone I've ever known. This, whatever this is. I don't know if I can keep up with it." The words hung in the air, an invitation, a confession. He wanted to explore it all with her. He wanted to feel everything she had to offer, to dive deeper into whatever this was. But he knew it wasn't that simple. They were from two entirely different worlds, with entirely different rules. Zara's lips parted, as if she were about to speak, but the moment was interrupted by a sudden, sharp noise, the sound of alarms echoing down the hallway. The room they were in shifted as a blast of cold air filtered through the ventilation system. The alarm was low at first, but it steadily grew louder, reverberating in the walls. Ethan's heart sank. The facility's security was on high alert. Zara stiffened, her eyes narrowing. She could hear it before Ethan could, her heightened senses alerting her to the presence of guards closing in on their location. But there was more at play than just the sound of footsteps. There was something deeper, something more primal in the air, a sense of urgency that sent a jolt through her system. "We need to move. Now," she said, her voice calm but firm, betraying the tension in her body. The change in her tone sent a chill down Ethan's spine. She was ready to act, to protect them both. But from what? Ethan's mind raced. They had to get out of there. But how? He barely understood what was happening. This wasn't a normal mission, this was personal. This was life or death. And even though the facility was on lockdown, the desire to stay with Zara, to continue this forbidden connection, was stronger than ever. As he started to move toward the door, Zara placed a hand on his chest, halting him in his tracks. Her touch was gentle, but there was power behind it. "Trust me," she said simply. Her eyes met his, and in them, he saw something he hadn't fully grasped before: vulnerability. "I don't have much experience with humans," Zara continued, her tone softer now. "But I know one thing, you're not like the others. You're different." Her words hung between them, filling the space with a weight that neither of them could ignore. It was more than just a compliment. It was a realization, a revelation that they were on the brink of something that neither could quite grasp, but both desperately needed. Ethan reached for her, his hand shaking as he cupped her face. "You think I'm different?" he asked, his voice low, breathless with anticipation. She nodded slowly. I do. Their eyes locked once again, the intensity of their unspoken connection filling the room with a charged energy that neither could deny. But before either of them could act on their emotions, a flash of blinding light erupted from the security panel beside the door. A high-pitched screech filled the air as the door slammed shut, sealing them inside. Ethan cursed under his breath, moving to the panel to override the lock. But the moment his fingers made contact with the system, it sparked and buzzed, sending a jolt of electricity through his body. He recoiled, instinctively grabbing at his chest. Zara was beside him in an instant, her cool hands gripping his arm, her touch somehow soothing the sharp pain. She muttered something under her breath in her native tongue, and a wave of energy passed through her hand lighting up with a soft glow. "You're going to be all right," she whispered, her voice tender despite the chaos unfolding around them. But it wasn't just the physical connection that Ethan felt now. It was the realization that this moment, their connection, was stronger than anything the facility could throw at them. It was more than just an attraction, it was something deeper, something primal. Zara leaned into him, her forehead resting against his. "This is just the beginning, Ethan. We need to survive this first, but after that..." She let her words trail off, as if the rest of what she had to say was meant only for him. Ethan, though filled with urgency, allowed himself a brief moment to breathe in the scent of her soft, almost like freshly fallen rain, mixed with something electric. It was a feeling he would never be able to forget. The realization that, in the end, survival wasn't just about escaping this moment. It was about what would come after. It was about what they would build together. Ethan and Zara stood in the dimly lit room, the pulsating alarm now replaced with a suffocating silence that seemed to stretch for eternity. The door, sealed shut, was their only means of escape, and it was locked tight. Sparks flew from the security panel as Ethan tried desperately to force it open, but it was no use. The system was designed to prevent anyone from leaving or entering during lockdown. "Damn it!" Ethan growled, stepping back in frustration. His heart pounded in his chest, the adrenaline coursing through his veins as the clock ticked down. They were running out of time. Zara's gaze never left him. The look in her violet eyes was unreadable, yet there was a fierce intensity there, an undeniable determination that only seemed to grow stronger with each passing second. It was as if she knew something that Ethan didn't, as if she had some deeper understanding of the situation and of what was coming. "I have another way," Zara said, her voice quiet but sure. She stepped closer to the panel, her slender fingers brushing over the control system. As she touched it, a faint light glowed beneath her skin, a soft, pulsating hum emanating from her body. It was as if she were channeling her energy into the system. Ethan watched, captivated by the way Zara moved, each gesture graceful yet filled with an unsettling power. Her long white hair swayed with each movement, the subtle glow of her skin giving her an almost ethereal presence. Her entire being radiated strength, yet in this moment, she was showing him something new: vulnerability. She was relying on her abilities, on her alien nature, to get them out. The panel flickered for a moment, before suddenly, the door creaked open. Zara's eyes met Ethan's. There was a brief moment of silence between them, as if the world had paused for just a heartbeat. Then, she nodded toward the open doorway. This way. We don't have much time. Ethan didn't hesitate. He was ready to follow her, to get out of this mess. But the moment he stepped through the door, his hand instinctively brushed against Zara's. The contact was electric, alive with an energy that seemed to surge between them. It wasn't just physical. It was something deeper, something neither of them could fully explain. It was a connection that transcended their differences, their worlds. They moved quickly through the narrow hallways, their footsteps echoing against the sterile walls. Zara led the way, her body moving with fluid precision, almost like she was navigating a world she knew too well. Ethan, by contrast, had to force himself to keep up. His mind raced with thoughts of Zara, of the situation they were in, and of the undeniable pull that had been building between them since the moment they met. As they turned a corner, they came face to face with a group of security guards, armed and ready. The tension was palpable. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He was ready to fight, ready to protect Zara. But before he could act, Zara raised a hand, her eyes locking onto his. "Stay calm," she whispered, her voice steady. She stepped forward, her body moving with purpose. The guards hesitated, confused by her calm demeanor. Zara's violet eyes glowed faintly, and Ethan felt the familiar pulse of energy surround her as she used her telepathic abilities to disorient the guards. The guards stumbled back, disoriented, as Zara's energy crackled around them. Her telepathic wave was subtle but powerful, making their minds scramble, rendering them incapable of reacting. Ethan couldn't help but watch in awe as Zara took control of the situation. She wasn't just beautiful. She was a force, an undeniable power that no one could challenge. Without saying a word, Zara turned back to Ethan. "Let's go." Ethan nodded, impressed by her strength, but the realization hit him hard. Zara was more than just an alien. She was a protector. And for the first time, Ethan saw her not just as someone to be fascinated by, but as someone he could truly rely on. They continued to move swiftly through the corridors, but the further they went, the more intense the atmosphere became. Something was off. It was as if the building itself was closing in on them, its very walls pressing against them, suffocating them. The sound of their footsteps grew louder, as the hallways twisted, bending in ways that felt impossible, until they finally reached a hidden chamber, an underground facility that seemed to pulse with an eerie light. "This is where it all began," Zara whispered, her voice carrying an emotion that Ethan couldn't quite place. "This is where my people were brought." Ethan's eyes scanned the room, taking in the strange, alien technology around them. The walls were adorned with symbols he didn't recognize, glowing softly in the dim light. Strange machines hummed quietly in the corners, their purpose unclear but undeniably important. "This is where your people..." Ethan trailed off, trying to make sense of it all. But Zara's expression was distant, haunted by memories he couldn't understand. "Where they experimented on us," she said, her voice low. "Where they tried to break us, to use us as weapons." And Zara stopped, her breath catching in her throat. She turned to face Ethan, her eyes suddenly full of pain. "I was one of them. One of the last experiments." Ethan felt his heart drop at her words. He reached out to her, but she stepped back, her expression hardening once more. They turned me into something I didn't want to be, she continued, her voice steady but filled with sadness. But you've shown me something different, Ethan. Something I never thought I'd feel again. Ethan took another step forward, his hand gently brushing against her arm. Zara, you don't have to carry this burden alone. Whatever happened, whatever they did to you, you don't have to face it alone. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, Ethan saw the weight she carried, the fear, the trauma that haunted her every move. But in that moment, there was something else there too, a flicker of hope, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. She finally stepped into his embrace, the warmth of their bodies a quiet reminder of their connection. Her body was tense, yet she allowed herself to relax against him, the touch between them a subtle promise of protection, of understanding. I don't know what the future holds, Ethan, she whispered into his ear. But I know I want to face it with you. Ethan's heart surged with emotion, and he held her tighter, his mind spinning with possibilities. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for something far greater, something he never expected to find. As they stood there, in the heart of the alien facility, a sense of calm settled over them. They had come so far, and yet the real journey was just beginning. They would face dangers, challenges, and enemies that neither of them fully understood. But together, they would fight because together, they were unstoppable. The faint hum of the machines around them was the only sound that filled the cold, sterile air. Zara and Ethan stood in the hidden chamber, their hands still entwined, a tenuous bond that had only grown in strength since their first meeting. Yet, despite the intimacy they shared in this moment, both of them knew the truth: they weren't safe. Not yet. Zara's gaze wandered over the room, her eyes scanning every corner, every flickering light, as if searching for something. Her features, typically so composed, now showed the cracks in her armor, the remnants of the battle that had raged within her for so long. Ethan watched her, knowing there was more she wasn't saying, but respecting the silence she held for now. He wasn't going to push her, not when the world outside this room was falling apart. A sound echoed down the hallway, a soft but unmistakable thud that made both of them freeze. Zara's eyes flashed, a sudden tension gripping her body. She knew. They were here. The enemy was closing in. They found us, Zara whispered, her voice low but filled with resolve. Ethan didn't need any further explanation. His muscles tensed as he stepped forward, scanning the room for anything they could use as a weapon. It wasn't that he feared fighting, far from it, but this was different. This was no longer about survival, this was about protecting Zara. "We can't stay here," he said, his voice steady as he moved towards the door. "We need to leave now." But Zara didn't move. Instead, she stepped to the side, her hands resting lightly against the wall as she closed her eyes for a brief moment. She seemed to concentrate, her breath slow and controlled, her energy gathering around her like a tangible force. "You go first," she said softly, her voice not at all uncertain but calm, as if she had already planned what needed to happen next. Ethan turned to her, brows furrowing in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I can't protect you both while we run," she replied, her violet eyes locking onto his with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. You need to trust me, Ethan. I need to deal with them. A flicker of hesitation crossed his face, but it was quickly replaced by the resolute determination he always carried. He knew Zara wasn't asking for his approval, she was just telling him what had to be done. He nodded. I'll wait for you. Zara gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile, her glowing eyes softening. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face the shadows of her past, but she was willing to take the risk. She had Ethan now. And with him, she would face whatever horrors lay ahead. The sound of footsteps grew louder. The enemies were getting closer. Zara's body surged with energy, and a pale light emanated from her skin, bright enough to cast long shadows on the walls. Ethan's heart raced as he watched her prepare for battle. He didn't want to leave her, but he understood. He stepped back, moving to the edge of the doorway to watch her. His breath caught in his throat, a mix of awe and fear swirling inside him. He had never seen Zara like this before. She was more than just beautiful, she was a force of nature, and this was the side of her that made her dangerous. Zara raised her arms, the space around her pulsing with raw power. The room vibrated, and the energy she controlled crackled in the air. A surge of telepathic energy expanded outward, sending a ripple through the walls, distorting the space around her. The doors to the chamber burst open. A team of guards poured in, weapons raised, their expressions cold and determined. But they weren't ready for Zara. With a single motion, Zara flicked her wrist, and the energy around her coiled like a serpent, wrapping around the guards and throwing them backward. The sound of metal slamming against the walls echoed through the chamber as the guards struggled to recover. Zara was no longer the fragile, haunted woman Ethan had met. She was something else entirely, a warrior, a protector, driven by a force he couldn't understand, but felt every time they touched. She focused on the last remaining guard, his weapon aimed directly at her, but she wasn't fazed. With a subtle gesture, she seized control of his mind, sending waves of disorientation crashing through him. The guard's eyes glazed over, his weapon falling to the floor as he crumpled to his knees. Ethan had seen military combat, had fought in countless dangerous situations, but nothing had ever been like this. Zara was not just defeating her enemies, she was reshaping the very space around her. She was rewriting the rules of what was possible. When the last guard fell, Zara lowered her arms, her chest rising and falling with each deep breath. The light around her flickered and dimmed, leaving only a faint glow at the tips of her hair and the edges of her skin. She turned to Ethan, her expression unreadable. It's done. Ethan stepped forward, his heart racing, his muscles still tense from the fight. Are you okay? Zara's lips curled slightly, her eyes softening. I'm always okay. The words were simple, but Ethan could feel the weight behind them. Zara wasn't just saying that she was physically fine. She was reassuring him, in the only way she knew how. And for a moment, he allowed himself to believe it. But there was no time for sentiment now. The alarms were blaring again. They were far from done. We need to get out of here, Ethan said, the urgency in his voice growing. We can't wait much longer. Zara nodded, and together they moved quickly through the corridors. This time, though, there was no hesitation in their steps. They were a team, and with every step, the bond between them deepened. They had seen each other at their strongest, at their most vulnerable, and yet somehow, they had emerged stronger together. They passed through the tight security zones, the cityscape beyond the walls growing nearer, but even then, something ominous loomed over them. The connection between Zara and Ethan had only just begun, but they both knew it was a connection that would change everything. Ethan and Zara dashed through the narrow corridor, the oppressive hum of the facility's alarms filling the air. Each step felt like an eternity, the echo of their footsteps reverberating against the sterile walls. They could hear the distant sounds of pursuit, the muffled voices of security forces growing nearer. Zara's presence beside him was an anchor, but the growing urgency of their situation gnawed at his insides. They reached a locked gate, the cold metallic surface blocking their path. Zara's glowing fingertips brushed the surface of the gate, and with a soft hum, the mechanism whined before giving way, the door sliding open effortlessly. "Impressive," Ethan muttered, his admiration for her powers only growing with every passing second. Zara didn't respond. She was focused, her senses heightened, her sharp eyes scanning the dimly lit hallway for any signs of danger. There was no time to bask in the victory of small moments, they were too close to being cornered. As they continued to move, Zara's thoughts were distant. She had seen far too many battles, far too many worlds crumble under the weight of their own desires and mistakes. The technology here, the alien tech that she had spent her life studying, was beyond her comprehension. But there was something else, something more pressing, pulling her toward the planet she had only just begun to understand. Ethan was the reason she was still fighting. In his presence, she felt a connection that she had never known before, something more powerful than any weapon, more lasting than any victory. And yet, she couldn't shake the fear that what they were doing was just another step toward destruction. "There's a way out," she said, her voice as steady as she could make it, her mind racing through calculations. "We need to get to the transport chamber." Ethan nodded, already anticipating what was to come. "Lead the way." They moved like shadows, darting through dim-lit hallways, bypassing guards and automated drones. The tension between them was palpable, but it was more than just the imminent danger. There was an unspoken understanding growing between them, a connection that was starting to take form. As they reached the transport chamber, Zara's mind briefly flickered to the moment she had touched him, that brief moment when their hands had met, and something had sparked. She had felt the heat of his skin against hers, the strength of his pulse, and something deep inside her had awakened. A desire she hadn't known she could feel for someone like him. She couldn't deny it, her feelings for him were changing. The chamber was dark, the flickering lights casting long shadows on the walls. Zara quickly moved to the console, her fingers dancing over the controls. She had to trust that the transport system was still operational, otherwise, they were trapped. Ethan stood behind her, watching her every move, admiring the way she handled the complex technology with ease. There was something mesmerizing about her poise, the way she seemed to command the energy around her, as if she wasn't just surviving, but thriving. Her beauty, her intelligence, her grace, it all felt otherworldly, and yet, it felt so familiar. "Zara," he began softly, breaking the silence. "What's going to happen after we escape?" We can't just keep running forever. Zara paused, her hands hovering over the console as her thoughts lingered. She wanted to tell him the truth that she didn't know. That the war she had fought for so long had left scars deep within her, scars that might never heal. That despite everything, she still didn't understand why she felt this connection to him, why it was pulling her so relentlessly forward. But the words wouldn't come. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice tinged with something raw, something vulnerable. "I don't know what's waiting for us after this. I only know that we can't stop now. Not until I can help you help your world." Ethan's gaze softened, his heart aching for her in a way he didn't fully understand. She was strong, far stronger than he had ever imagined. But in that moment, he saw the cracks in her armor, the fear, the vulnerability, the uncertainty. "You're not alone, Zara," he said quietly, stepping closer. "We're in this together. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Zara met his gaze, and for a brief moment, the weight of their shared mission, their shared experience, seemed to fade away. There was only the two of them, standing in the dim light, locked in a silent promise. Before Zara could respond, the console came to life, a hum filling the room as the transport system powered up. They didn't have time for words, only action. With a sharp movement, Zara activated the transport, the room around them beginning to shimmer as the energy built up. The air seemed to crackle with electricity, the hum growing louder, the room distorting as they were pulled into the vortex. Ethan grabbed Zara's hand, pulling her close as the vortex sucked them into the unknown. They had no idea where they were going, no idea what awaited them, but in that moment, they both knew they were in this together no matter what. The last thing Ethan saw before the world around him exploded into a cascade of lights was Zara's eyes, glowing softly, filled with a strange mixture of hope and sadness. As they were thrust into the void, he felt the weight of their shared journey settle around them, heavy, but not impossible. Together, they would face whatever came next. The vortex of light disoriented them, pulling them through what felt like an endless, spinning tunnel of colors. Ethan's heart raced, his mind a blur as the sensation of weightlessness surrounded him. For a brief moment, everything felt like it was shifting, like they were caught between worlds, his Earth, and whatever new reality they were being thrown into. Then, the dizzying whirl of light faded, and with it, the harsh pull on his body subsided. The world around him snapped into focus. They were on a new planet. The ground beneath their feet was soft, almost spongy, as though the very earth itself was alive. It was warm, comfortably so, like a late spring day on Earth, but the air smelled different. Sweet, almost floral, but with an underlying scent that was both foreign and familiar. Zara, still holding his hand, took a deep breath. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the landscape. "This is not where I expected us to end up," Zara muttered, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and weariness. Ethan looked around, his breath catching in his throat. The landscape was nothing like Earth. Rolling hills of glowing, bioluminescent plants surrounded a dense, mist-filled forest that stretched to the horizon. Massive trees with thick, crystalline trunks towered over them, their leaves shimmering with vibrant hues of blue and green. In the distance, a glowing river meandered through the valley, the water moving like liquid silver. The sky above them was a swirling canvas of purple and gold, stars twinkling faintly despite the sun hanging low in the sky. It was beautiful, hauntingly so. And yet, it felt so out of place. Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Where are we?" he asked, his voice quiet, almost unsure. Zara glanced around before pulling him closer, her mind working quickly. She seemed to be listening, as if hearing something only she could understand. Her glowing purple eyes flickered with faint signals, processing the data she was receiving. "We're not on any map I've ever seen," she said after a long moment. "This is a neutral zone, a place that exists between dimensions. It's not quite a part of any world, but it's a meeting point for those who understand the ways of the universe." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Between dimensions? You mean, like, a portal?" Zara nodded. "Exactly. I don't know how this world opened, but we're here now. And if we don't find the answer soon, we may not be able to leave." The urgency in her tone was unmistakable. But there was more to it than just escape. Ethan could feel the gravity of the situation in her eyes. This was more than just their survival. This world was important to her, possibly to the survival of her people, and that weight pressed heavily on her slender shoulders. "You don't need to protect me, you know," Ethan said, his voice sincere. He could feel her determination, but he also saw the burden in her gaze. "We're in this together." Her lips curved into a faint smile, the briefest of expressions, before she turned away. "I'm not protecting you," she whispered. "I'm trying to make sure we don't destroy each other in the process." Before Ethan could respond, a sound broke the silence, an eerie hum, rising from the depths of the forest. Zara's eyes flashed to the trees, her muscles tensing. "They know we're here," she said, her tone now filled with a sense of caution. From the trees emerged figures, strange, humanoid creatures, their features partially obscured by the glowing mist. Their skin was a soft, translucent white, and their long limbs were wrapped in flowing robes made of what appeared to be woven vines and leaves. Their faces were angular, almost ethereal, with eyes that shimmered like stars in the night. They moved with a fluidity that seemed unnatural, their bodies graceful and predatory. Ethan's instincts kicked in, and he instinctively stepped forward, ready to fight, his muscles coiling like a spring. But Zara placed a hand on his chest, her fingers warm against his skin. "Wait," she whispered. "These aren't enemies. They're guardians. Keep calm." The guardians stopped a few yards away, watching them with their luminous eyes. One of them stepped forward, tilting its head in what could be considered a greeting. Zara's expression softened. "They're curious," she said. "And they won't harm us unless they feel threatened." Ethan glanced at Zara, then back at the guardians. He wasn't so sure. But his gut told him Zara was right. There was no malice in their eyes, only a deep, unspoken understanding. The guardian raised a hand, and to Ethan's surprise, a soft light surrounded them. It wasn't forceful, but instead, it seemed to embrace them, caressing their skin like the softest breeze. It wasn't threatening, it was almost inviting. Zara stepped forward, pulling Ethan with her. She placed her hand in the air in response, a sign of trust, before she began speaking in a language that Ethan couldn't understand. It was melodic, like a song, the words flowing like water. The Guardian's eyes glowed brighter, then a gentle hum filled the air. Zara turned to Ethan, her eyes filled with a sense of realization. "They've sensed our arrival," she said. "But they don't know if we come in peace or not. They're testing us, seeing if we're worthy of their trust." Ethan didn't fully understand the weight of the moment, but he knew he wasn't about to let Zara face it alone. His heart beat faster, the connection between them growing more palpable by the second. "How do we prove we're worthy?" Ethan asked. Zara met his gaze. "We show them our intentions. We don't hide who we are. And maybe, just maybe, we'll find what we're looking for." As they moved forward together, their hands brushing, a strange warmth spread through Ethan's chest. This was no longer just about survival. It was about trust, about understanding a world far beyond what he had ever imagined. And through it all, he felt Zara by his side, her presence grounding him, even as the world around them continued to shift and change. The air hummed with energy, as Ethan and Zara slowly moved toward the center of the Guardian's clearing. The light surrounding them flickered and shifted in color, deepening into an iridescent blue, as the Guardians watched them with unwavering attention. Each step felt like a weightless movement, the gravity of their unknown surroundings pressing down on them with growing intensity. Zara moved with grace, her every motion fluid and sure, like the flow of a river. Ethan couldn't help but watch her, captivated by the contrast of her beauty and the mystery surrounding her. Her skin glowed like emerald fire, the light from the distant stars above mixing with the soft sheen of her complexion. Her white hair rippled in the breeze, catching the light, her eyes reflecting a spectrum of purple and silver. Despite the otherworldliness of her, she seemed more real than anything he'd ever known. The Guardians, still standing motionless, began to hum in unison, a low, resonating sound that made the ground beneath their feet vibrate gently. It was almost as though the entire planet was alive, breathing with them, acknowledging their presence. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest, but it wasn't fear. It was something deeper, something that echoed the bond they had forged over the past few days. The presence of Zara beside him was no longer just comforting. It was essential. The leader of the Guardians stepped forward, extending a delicate arm toward them. Its hand, pale, almost translucent, reached to gently touch Zara's shoulder. She stood still, her eyes meeting the Guardian's glowing gaze. Without a word, Zara lowered her head slightly, a sign of both respect and understanding. The Guardian's hand shifted, moving from Zara's shoulder to her heart. It was a gesture that seemed to connect with something deep within her. Ethan could feel a wave of heat ripple through him, though it wasn't from the environment, it was the palpable tension building between them. Zara's breath quickened, her chest rising and falling as her heart seemed to respond to the touch, and Ethan instinctively reached for her hand. Zara's gaze flickered to Ethan, her eyes softening with unspoken words, and she gave his hand a gentle squeeze. In that moment, it was clear she wasn't just opening herself up to the Guardians, she was opening herself to him. Ethan's fingers brushed against her smooth skin, the warmth of her hand sending a strange shiver down his spine. There was something about this world, about this moment, that made every sense come alive. The air felt charged with anticipation, and his pulse seemed to match the rhythm of the Guardian's hum. As the Guardian's hand continued to linger on Zara's chest, a soft, glowing light began to radiate from it, curling and weaving around her body. Ethan watched, mesmerized by the transformation that seemed to be taking place. The light didn't hurt, but instead enveloped her with an almost maternal warmth. It was as though the planet itself was wrapping Zara in a blanket of protection, of trust. And then, it happened. The Guardian's voice, soft, melodic, yet carrying a weight of ancient knowledge, cut through the hum, though it was only partially understood. Zara's eyes fluttered closed, and a delicate tear slipped down her cheek. She opened her eyes and turned to Ethan. "It's true," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "This is where my people's future lies." The Guardians stepped back, their task complete, as the light around Zara dimmed. She looked back at Ethan, her expression filled with an emotion so complex, it left him speechless. He could feel the weight of her words, the gravity of what they meant. "We're not just here to escape," she continued, her voice now steady, yet full of emotion. "This is a test of all we've been through. And now, I'm ready to see where we go from here. With you." Ethan didn't know what to say. The moment stretched between them, suspended in time. His heart raced. Every part of him was aware of how deeply this moment had changed them both, how much was now riding on the decisions they would make in the days ahead. With a soft, unspoken understanding, their lips met. The kiss was slow at first, tentative, like two people exploring an uncharted territory. But then it deepened, and in the connection, Ethan felt all the emotions he couldn't put into words: the desire to protect her, the overwhelming pull of their bond, the yearning for something that felt so much larger than themselves. Her hands cupped his face, the warmth of her skin igniting a fire in him that he didn't know was there. Her touch sent a spark through him, and as their kiss lingered, his senses seemed to sharpen. He could feel her heartbeat against his chest, the soft breath she took as she pressed closer to him. Her scent, delicate and floral, yet something else, something deeper, something he couldn't define, flooded his senses. The world seemed to spin, but there was only this connection, this pull. The Guardians, standing in the distance, watched silently, their expressions unreadable. But in this moment, Ethan didn't care. There was nothing but Zara, and the incredible bond they had formed. And then, with a shuddering breath, Zara pulled back slightly, her eyes wide with emotion. She looked at him, her lips trembling slightly as she whispered, You feel it, don't you? The bond." Ethan nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "Yeah, I feel it too." But their moment was short-lived, as a low rumble echoed in the distance. The Guardians' faces turned grim, and the calm energy of the moment shifted. Zara's eyes snapped to the horizon, her expression darkening. "They're coming," she murmured. Ethan turned to look, his heart skipping a beat. The world around them seemed to shift again, and in the distance, a shadow began to move. The storm outside raged. The two of them stood in the quiet aftermath, surrounded by the sounds of the dimly lit lab, and the quiet hum of the alien technology around them. Zara, her luminous green skin glowing faintly in the soft light, stood still, her silver eyes locked on Ethan. The tension between them was palpable. For all the conflict and hardship, all the times they had been torn apart by their differences, something had shifted. The attraction, the emotional connection, had solidified into something undeniable. Zara could feel the faint pulse of his heartbeat, synchronized with hers. They were no longer two beings from different worlds, they were connected. The chemistry between them, the understanding that had grown, wasn't something they could ignore anymore. As her silken white hair shifted gently with the touch of the wind, her eyes sparkled with uncertainty, yet undeniable trust. Ethan, despite all the chaos and violence of the war that loomed over them, stepped closer. He had seen countless battles, faced impossible odds, and survived them all. Yet, in this moment, with Zara so close, he found himself unsure, vulnerable, for the first time in years. His muscular frame felt heavy with the weight of all they had been through, but there was something lighter now. A glimmer of hope, perhaps. "I never thought I'd find peace in the middle of all this," Ethan said, his deep voice soft but filled with wonder. "I never thought it would be you, but here we are." Zara's sharp ear twitched slightly at his words, her delicate yet powerful form standing proudly before him. A soft laugh escaped her lips, a sound so foreign to him, but so sweet to his ears. "You think I bring peace to your chaos, Ethan? It is you who has brought me the first taste of freedom in my entire life," Zara whispered, her voice carrying a strange mix of vulnerability and strength. "You helped me, and in doing so, you freed yourself too." The warmth of her breath brushed against his skin, and he could feel the subtle tingle of her power, her energy wrapping around him like an invisible thread, drawing them closer. The sparks between them were no longer something to be avoided or denied. The undeniable pull of attraction, their shared history, the trials they had both endured, they were now facing them together. As she stepped closer to him, the soft, near ethereal scent of her perfume, a fragrance not of this world, yet somehow familiar to him, enveloped him. Her hands, gentle but strong, reached up to touch his chest, her fingers brushing the fabric of his advanced tech suit, tracing the contours of his muscles. The simple touch sent a ripple of heat through his body. Ethan closed the space between them, his large hands resting gently on her waist, feeling the warmth of her body under her sleek, skin-tight attire. The contrast between their worlds, their appearances, and even their biology, seemed to fade away in this moment. There were no longer any barriers. He leaned forward, slowly, as if unsure whether she would pull away, but Zara didn't. She met him halfway, their lips barely grazing at first. And then, it was as though the universe itself shifted in that one kiss. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm of emotions they both felt. Her lips were warm against his, and as their kiss deepened, Ethan felt the strength and fragility of Zara's existence, the weight of her alien nature mixed with the warmth of human love. Her body responded, pressing gently against his, and the energy that surged between them was tangible. Zara's energy began to flow through him, a connection deeper than physical touch. It was an exchange of their very beings, something neither of them could have anticipated. The sound of the storm outside was drowned out, as their bodies and minds synced together, a single force that neither culture nor technology could separate. As the kiss broke, Zara's gaze softened, her breath shallow but calm, her body slightly trembling. Her eyes, those radiant purple eyes, now glistened with something new, something that went beyond her alien origins, beyond her mission. She was human in this moment. "I never thought I'd feel this, Ethan," Zara murmured softly, her voice a whisper against his skin. "Never thought I'd feel what you feel." Ethan smiled gently, brushing a lock of her hair behind her ear. "Neither did I, Zara. But here we are. And I don't want to face this universe alone anymore." Their bond was now undeniable, a connection forged through the trials of war, of survival, and now, of love. The air between them hummed softly with their combined energy, the electric charge of their touch lingering, as they shared one last look. One filled with unspoken promises, with the knowledge that their journey had only just begun. They had been through so much, but this moment, this connection, was the start of something new. The story of two beings, so different yet so alike, was just beginning to unfold. As they turned toward the stars, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, they knew that they had each other. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. In that final moment, when the darkness of space seemed to swallow us whole, when the distance between two souls finally diminished to nothing more than a whisper of light, I understood something I had never grasped before. Love isn't defined by distance. It isn't even defined by time. It is the connection between two hearts, two beings, that transcends everything else, everything. The universe had stretched and bent to our will, but in the end, love didn't need to be understood. It just was. In the vastness of space, where the rules of reality no longer made sense, we found something pure, something raw, and real. The kind of love that doesn't require explanations, just a willingness to feel, to believe. But as our hearts beat in sync, with the universe wide open before us, I couldn't help but wonder. Is this where our story ends, or have we only just begun? Maybe the real question isn't how we survived the impossible odds. Maybe it's about how love can lead us to places we never thought possible. To dimensions where our hearts know no boundaries. So, tell me this, can love really defy the limits of time, space, and all we understand? And what happens when two hearts, so far apart, find the courage to touch, to intertwine, and to conquer the distance? The answer may be unknown, but one thing is certain. We are about to explore it together. If you've felt the pull of this impossible love story, if you've seen the spark between these two souls, don't let this journey end here. Like, comment, and subscribe to join me on this epic intergalactic adventure. Be part of the first 1,000 to explore this new world with us. And together, we'll discover what truly connects us, across the stars. Let your heart wander through the unknown. Subscribe now, and become part of something that will transcend the limits of space and time.